We've already talked about Metaplanet here on the channel, but today I want to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. The story isn't just about a Japanese company buying Bitcoin. The real question is, can Metaplanet actually become the MicroStrategy of Asia? If you've been following Bitcoin over the past few years, you know the name MicroStrategy is impossible to ignore. Michael Saylor and his company changed the corporate landscape in 2020 when they went all in on Bitcoin. What started as a traditional software business suddenly transformed into the biggest corporate Bitcoin holder in the world. MicroStrategy has now stacked over 200,000 Bitcoin. That move turned the MSTR stock into a Bitcoin proxy for Wall Street investors. Now here is where it gets interesting. In Japan, Metaplanet decided to follow a similar path. Originally, it was a hospitality company, not exactly the type of business you'd connect with crypto or finance, but in 2024, it shocked markets with a bold Bitcoin treasury strategy. Since then, Metaplanet has been steadily accumulating Bitcoin and branding itself as the Asian version of MicroStrategy. Investors, especially in Asia, began to pay closer attention. Of course, the scale couldn't be more different. MicroStrategy is a multi-billion-dollar company. Metaplanet is still a small cap stock, and MicroStrategy holds hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin while Metaplanet only holds a few hundred so far. But that's what makes this comparison so fascinating. MicroStrategy shows us what happens when a Western company bets its future on Bitcoin. Metaplanet could be showing us how the same playbook plays out in Asia. So in this video, we'll break down the playbook. We'll cover what MicroStrategy did, what Metaplanet is trying to do, where they overlap, and where they're worlds apart. And by the end, we'll tackle the big question. Is Metaplanet just a copycat, or could it one day become a Bitcoin giant in its own right? MicroStrategy's story is where this comparison begins. Before Bitcoin, it was just another enterprise software company. Solid, but far from revolutionary. Everything changed in 2020. Michael Saylor, the outspoken CEO, looked at money printing after COVID, the weakening dollar, and came to a bold conclusion. Cash was trash. Instead of sitting on dollars that lost value, Saylor put a huge chunk of the company's treasury into Bitcoin. The first buy in August 2020 was 21,454 Bitcoin for $250 million. A massive headline at the time, but just the start. What set MicroStrategy apart was its aggressiveness. It didn't stop at excess cash. The company raised debt, issued convertible notes, sold stock, and used every tool possible to keep buying Bitcoin. Each time markets thought they were done, Saylor came back with more. Fast forward to 2025, and MicroStrategy now holds over 226,000 Bitcoin. That's more than 1% of Bitcoin's supply, more than many countries hold. Its stock, once tied to software, is now a Bitcoin proxy on Wall Street. For traditional investors, buying MSTR became the easiest way to get Bitcoin exposure. Saylor himself turned into one of Bitcoin's loudest voices. He didn't just buy quietly. He went on interviews, podcasts, and stages worldwide, making the case for Bitcoin to corporations and institutions. That's the MicroStrategy Playbook, okay? A bold pivot from business software to Bitcoin. Relentless accumulation using both cash and financing and turning a stock into a gateway for Bitcoin exposure. The difference is scale. MicroStrategy had billions, Wall Street access, and Saylor's conviction. That's the bar Metaplanet is now measured against. While MicroStrategy was making headlines in the US, a much smaller company in Japan was quietly taking notes. That company is Metaplanet. Metaplanet started out in hospitality and entertainment, hotels, leisure, nothing to do with Bitcoin or even tech. But in 2024, it shocked investors by announcing a bold new treasury strategy, inspired by no other than MicroStrategy. Metaplanet began shifting parts of its reserves into Bitcoin. The first purchases weren't massive, but for all small cap Japanese stock, a few hundred Bitcoin was still a big statement, enough for the media to quickly brand it Asia's MicroStrategy. Investors who had never paid attention to this company suddenly started watching. Japan's economic backdrop makes this even more interesting. The yen has been weakening for years, and the Bank of Japan has kept interest rates near zero. Holding cash in Japan means slowly losing value. By moving into Bitcoin, Metaplanet positioned itself as a company willing to break from Japan's conservative corporate culture. Of course, the scale is nowhere close to MicroStrategy. Saylor's company holds more than 226,000 Bitcoin and Metaplanet only a few hundred. But the similarity is in the strategy, not the size. Like MicroStrategy, Metaplanet is turning itself from a traditional business into a Bitcoin holding vehicle. And that's exactly why people are paying attention. Investors don't buy Metaplanet today for its hotel business, right? They buy it because it's one of the only ways to get Bitcoin exposure through a Japanese stock. So while it's still tiny compared to MicroStrategy, Metaplanet has become an early mover in Asia's corporate Bitcoin story. And the question is whether it can scale the same way, or if it will remain a small shadow of the giant it's trying to follow. So why do people compare Metaplanet to MicroStrategy in the first place? On the surface, the two companies couldn't be more different. One's a global tech firm, the other a small cap Japanese stock. But when you look at the strategy, the parallels are clear. First, both companies completely redefined their identity around Bitcoin. MicroStrategy went from being known for business intelligence software to being seen almost entirely as a Bitcoin holding vehicle. Metaplanet, once a hospitality company, is going through the same transformation. For investors, both stocks are no longer about the original business. They're about Bitcoin exposure. Second, both used bold treasury moves to make it happen. Instead of holding cash, they shifted reserves into Bitcoin. That decision turned them from ordinary companies into symbols for corporate Bitcoin adoption. Third, both attract a unique type of investor. These aren't people buying because they believe in hotels or software, right? They're buying because they want indirect access to Bitcoin through the stock market. In the US, MicroStrategy became the go-to Bitcoin proxy for Wall Street. In Asia, Metaplanet is trying to carve out the same role. Finally, both are deliberately shaping their brand around Bitcoin. Michael Saylor has made MicroStrategy synonymous with Bitcoin. Metaplanet's management is openly embracing the label of Asia's MicroStrategy. It's a way to signal to investors what they stand for. Of course, the scale is totally different, but the pattern pivoting into Bitcoin, transforming the company's purpose, and marketing themselves as a Bitcoin vehicle is why the comparison sticks. When people call Metaplanet Asia's MicroStrategy, they're not saying it's on the same level yet. They're saying the DNA of the strategy is the same, and that's what makes this story so compelling. Now, let's talk about the differences, because this is where the comparison between Metaplanet and MicroStrategy really comes into focus. The first difference is scale. MicroStrategy is a multi-billion-dollar company trading on NASDAQ with global visibility. And Metaplanet, on the other hand, is a small cap Japanese stock. It operates in a much smaller market with far less liquidity and reach. And secondly, the size of their Bitcoin holdings couldn't be further apart. As I mentioned, MicroStrategy has stacked over 226,000 Bitcoin, more than 1% of the total supply. Metaplanet so far holds only a few hundred. Even though the strategy looks similar, the numbers put them in completely different leagues. Thirdly, leadership style. Look, Michael Saylor is a global personality. He's not just a CEO. He's become one of the most recognized Bitcoin evangelists in the world. Metaplanet's leadership, by comparison, is far more low profile. The company doesn't have a Saylor figure making global headlines. Fourth, market influence. MicroStrategy helped pave the way for corporate Bitcoin adoption in the West. Its decision influenced other firms and even nation states to look at Bitcoin differently. Metaplanet, for now, is more of a regional story. It's important in Japan, but it doesn't yet move the global conversation. Finally, Access to capital. MicroStrategy tapped into the US debt and equity market to raise billions for its Bitcoin purchases. Metaplanet simply doesn't have that same level of financial firepower. Its growth will depend on much smaller funding opportunities. So while the strategies look alike, the realities are very different. MicroStrategy is the heavyweight champion of corporate Bitcoin, and Metaplanet is a lightweight fighter stepping into the same ring. The question is whether it can grow strong enough to compete or if it will always stay in the shadows. So where does Metaplanet go from here? Right now, it's still in the early stages. With just a few hundred Bitcoin, Metaplanet isn't going to rival MicroStrategy anytime soon. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have potential. The company has a first mover advantage in Japan. In a market where most corporations play it safe, Metaplanet is the outliner, the one willing to take a bold stance on Bitcoin. That makes it stand out. In investing, being first often matters. Do with that what you will. If Bitcoin continues its long-term bull run, Metaplanet's strategy could pay off in a big way. Just look at what happened to MicroStrategy's stock. It went from being valued on software revenues to trading almost entirely on Bitcoin's price. Metaplanet could follow a similar path on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, becoming a proxy for Bitcoin in Asia. But the risks are real. Without massive access to capital, scaling up its Bitcoin holdings won't be easy. Its stock is also far less liquid, making it more volatile, and Japan's regulatory environment could become stricter if corporate Bitcoin adoption grows. Still, the upside is what excites investors. If Metaplanet keeps stacking, it could transform from a niche hospitality business into one of Asia's first true Bitcoin holding companies. It might never reach MicroStrategy's size, but it doesn't need to. Even at a fraction of that scale, it could become a standout Bitcoin play in the Asian market. From an investor's perspective, MicroStrategy and Metaplanet offer two different kinds of Bitcoin exposure. MicroStrategy is the established option. It's listed on NASDAQ, widely followed by institutions, and backed by Michael Saylor's relentless advocacy. For traditional investors, it's often seen as the safest way to get indirect Bitcoin exposure without holding crypto directly. Its massive holdings make it a predictable proxy. When Bitcoin